Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on SDG and Up skills. We have our world famous speaker Dr. Tamanna Koshla, Mr. Dan and Mr. David Smith. Mr. First, I would like to give chance Dr. Tamanna that what you want to discuss about SDG and specifically Up skill. How does it works?
SDGs, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, SDGs are some, they are basically the basic rights which people of the world, be it from Africa to Asia, global south to global north, everybody has the same rights. And the Sustainable Development Program speaks about two very important uh, aspects which I feel are extremely important, for example, for Africa and Asia, which is to do away with poverty. And that particular aspect has been taken from the Marxian notion, that despite the fact that Rawls also has spoken about dealing with poverty, etc., but the Marxists have been majorly been concerned about this particular aspect. So Africa has been dealing with this particular aspect, and so countries, Sudan, South Sudan, for example, and Nigeria, and many of the the South Africa is still better, but the North Africa is doing really badly. So, that be gender equality. Now, the feminists, for example, they would really want a world which is gender equal, where people are able to, where women are able to work without any chances of sexual harassment or assault or anything of that sort. And at home, for example, they are their work is, for example, not considered to be taken for granted. It should be paid work. So how does that happen? We have to all sit together and decide about it. But I guess these two are very important. Thirdly is, now uh, we have explored the water, we have explored the air, but we haven't explored the space as yet. So the space, for example, is a place where many of these, as Stephen Hawking, for example, he said that it is somewhere, you will find aliens, for example, and so that kind of scientific venture has to go into, as far as the sciences are concerned. So these are the three concerns are which are important, though others are equally and more than required important, but right now I was just focusing on these three.
Thank you, Mr. Dan. What you want to discuss about Up speaking, especially based on sustainable development goal?
Well, thanks again, Dr. Sharif. I think this show has the word talent in it, and I think talent is really the key that's going to be employed to achieve these sustainable development goals. First off, I don't know if sustainable is the right word, because what we really need is our regenerative development goals. If we sustain what we have now, we're going to sustain a lot of not very well working systems. So I think it is going to require an upskilling of talent to achieve the SDGs in a regenerative way. And I think a problem with the Sustainable Development Goals is the onus has been placed on very large entities, governments, corporations, not so much the individual, not so much community level organizations. And we don't really have a good way to keep score of how we're doing. I mean, I guess there are some estimates that we're only about 15% of the way on some of the goals. But when you give people a responsibility, you have to give them authority to execute the responsibility. And I don't see that that is being called into play. We need to have an economy of talent, and that also means people not just doing what they have to do, but what they love to do. I call it the love or bliss-based economy. And I think we're going to have a lot of that enabled with some of the digital tools like machine learning. Some people call it AI. I'd like to call it machine learning because I don't think it's really AI yet. But also, I'm a big fan of there being an 18th goal, which Tamana spoke about, the space economy goal. It's kind of, if you were, the goals speak to people and planet. They don't speak to people and the greater environment around the planet. If you were on an island and you wanted to fix the problems on the island, but you ignored the water, the ocean around the island, you really wouldn't be doing your job properly, because you might, by going onto the island, you might see new opportunities or threats that you weren't aware of before. We've done that with the space resource already, with the communications, with remote sensing, with just fulfilling the human nature of curiosity. They say curiosity is the second most powerful drive behind love. And I think you can't hold that back. And we are always pushing back the frontiers of curiosity. And that's why we need that 18th goal of space in the Sustainable Development Goals. So those are just some initial thoughts on the topic. And why don't I see what David's got to say about it?
Well, Dan, I agree with you on the comments you made, particularly that the citizens have to be involved and that it is not just a regional activity, but it's a global activity. And for us to really have impact on the Sustainable Development Goals, it has to be that way. And as you begin to look at the other thing, though, is in the topic today, it's also about upskilling. And upskilling is something that can be done across all those, because if I go back and look in the last decade, many have begun to understand that sustainability is no longer just a word to use, but some things that have to happen. There's people who say we're part of these large cycles and that we're in the extreme of one of the cycles, but we see damage being done, and we have to do that, particularly as we look at some of our limited resources, and particularly things in agri and what we see in the oceans and the water. So we need to understand that we're looking not just today, but also at our future generations. And many of you have heard me talk on these programs that we're in a time of lifelong learning. And this is particularly true when you look at the SDG goals. And what we need to do through the SDG goals is apply these concepts of lifelong learning, and particularly start at early age, where many of this type of mindset decisions are made in the education process. And we have to begin to look at some of this type of thinking. There is some evidence that sustainability is good for business, and good ESG, environmental, social, and governance performance, is known to create some higher potential returns on investment and provide some more resiliency in a crisis. You see there, and particularly with the younger generations, there's also some attraction, particularly with millennials, to investing in companies that have strong ESG metrics going forward. But one of the challenges with these metrics is there no clear standard, as you said, Dan, and we've talked about before in those. So it's sometimes it can be disinformation as well, and we know that going forward with it. But today one of the biggest questions is, how is our global economy going to change as we see our ongoing automation of many of the traditional manufacturing industry practices? We've talked with Dr. Sharif on his program in the past quite a bit about the fourth industrial revolution. We've talked about a circular economy, and all of those are part of it, but we clearly do not have the skills in place for this. And particularly, there's a lack of a digital skill gap for many as you begin to look at this. The viability and health of our society is going to depend on us upskilling massive amount of workers as we become more of a digital society, as we begin to put the data science tools in place, the machine learning, the vision recognition systems, the enhanced sensors, particularly widespread deployment of part of the scaling that is necessary for this, and the future work has to begin to go into that. There was a McKinsey estimate.
Okay, a little bit of internet outage with you, David. Well,
Study.
there we go. You're back. You blacked out for about 30 seconds there.
Okay. There's a McKinsey study that came out that said about 5 million US workers will need to be reskilled by the end of this year to remain viable. And that you see that we also know because of COVID that there's tremendous worker shortages. And we've got to look at ways to address this, be conscious of it, and produce the new skills and upskilling that is necessary to be productive in the next generation. So let me give it back to you, Dr. Sandman. Let me see what's happening with my internet again.
I think you're up, Tamana. What were the 2 points? I didn't follow the 2 points that you were emphasizing in your discussion.
Okay. The first one, which I was basically discussing, Dan, was like on people in the global south who are suffering with abysmal poverty have to be done away with. I mean, most of the people, for example, in India, we have a huge middle class, but there is an equal huge amount of people who are below poverty line. So, sustainable development goals, I mean, as you were also saying that sustainable is not the right word, because people, uh, it's just not about being sustainable. It is to lead a good life. It's just not to be able to sustain yourself in a life. You can get a rice, 1 kg of rice, and you can live with it for 1 week. But that kind of sustainability is not what we are talking about. We are talking about people who are able to raise themselves from a poor to middle classes, and from middle to a, a, a averagely more middle class, where they can um, have a good life. They can teach their children in the right schools, and they should be able to have the right college education. They should, just because they are poor, they should not be they should not have the problem of dealing with these problems. And Africa too has that problem. And um, I mean, Africa is a place where, I mean, all the countries are trying to enter there, be it America, be it France, be it UK, be it China. I mean, everybody wants to make it a colony. What the hell is happening? I mean, what is happening in Africa? I mean, in India is also trying to help. India is trying to help, but in a very positive way. I mean, I'm an Indian. Obviously, I'm going to support India, but India does not have any such intentions of colonizing, because it has been colonized itself. So it does not want to colonize Africa. They want to help them out of poverty. They want to help them out of the militias which are there in these countries, and to have pro democracy movements there. and that is what Indians are, and that is why in G20, African Union was invited, and they were given the membership, and that was all on the pretext of Mr. Modi. So Mr. Modi and India, for that matter, what which we call Bharat now, in Hindi as we call it. So yeah, that is what I was trying to say, the poverty. Then the second is a gender issue. No, women are exploited, and this is a fact. Be it prostitution, be it pornography, be it be it at homes, being beaten by their husbands, or I'm not trying to say that men are not harmed, but women are surely more harmed than men, you know and that, till the time that equality does not come, and women are not at the top positions, they don't break the glass ceilings, for example. How many women are multimillionaires? There are hardly any. So most of them would be men, because women are busy taking care of their, because most of their life goes on in taking care of their children, the houses, etc. I mean, I would say more in India, for example, this is the case. I'm not too much sure about US, for example. Dan must be doing much better than me, but still I feel women have to have a half of the chunk of their life goes in taking care of their children. So how will they progress in life? I mean, after all, everything boils down to the individual. Individuals are the ones, it's the satisfaction of the soul which is important, and each individual is a person in herself. So she or he need to progress spiritually, as far as the soul is concerned, and also in the worldly level, and only then can we get the satisfaction. So that is what I was trying to say, that women have to be able to bring about the best in themselves, and only then, when half of the population is exploited, how do you expect the other half to be happy? Nobody is happy, because there are some sections of people who are harmed. So till the time that doesn't happen, I guess we are going to be a very superficial societies, very superficial civilizations, and we need to send our women, which is happening. We have to send them to the space. We have to send them within the water. Finding, women can do tremendous work if they are encouraged for doing all these things. So yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and that gender equality is number 5 on the, the SDG list, and right
Yeah,
after education. So 4 and 5 seem to be the two really crucial ones, because without the quality education, you're not going to get the upskilling, and you're probably not going to get the gender equality either. I
yes,
know
absolutely,
in
absolutely.
America, 1 in 5 people is illiterate. That's a huge, scary number, and I think also 1 in 5 is below the poverty line. And it's probably even worse for the whole world. I think,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think Africa is a key. So you're saying India and Africa have this kind of uneasy relationship, then?
Yes.
Uh, yeah.
Now, I mean, we are having a very good relation now with Africa, actually, and because I mean, Russia. Sorry, I forgot mentioning. Russia too is majorly into Africa. So every country is trying to enter Africa. So, but India, for example, I mean, it's for everybody to see. I mean, it does not have an ulterior motive. It just wants to help. I mean, they don't want to colonize them, nor do we have those kind of capacities that we can colonize any other country. We ourselves are self-sufficient for our own people. And so when during COVID they needed vaccines, we gave free vaccines to them. So so India, for example, is also helping them out. We are just wanting to help them, nothing else. But many of the other, right now, there was a Africa and Russia, African Union and Russia's this what do you say, a conference I held last month, and Africans were really very keen on having good relationships with Russia. So they are kind of fed up with America and France, etc. Who have been, they want them to be out of Africa. So so they are favoring Russia, for example, over America. So yeah, that is something.
Yeah, I know at the UN, Russia was saying the U.S. has been this top-down power trying to dictate rules to the rest of the world, and I happen to think they're they're pretty good rules, but that's their story. They want a polycentric world culture, world hegemony, and I mean theoretically that's a good thing if people play by the due process and human rights. But yeah, I know the whole BRICS thing. The Brazil, India, Russia, China, Spain. Is it? I think is the S for Spain? I'm not.
South Africa.
South Africa. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of a counterpoise to the U.S. dominant world order. But yeah, I mean, I think China has pledged not to use nuclear weapons first, which is a good good pledge. I mean, it would be nice if all the countries could take that pledge.
Yeah.
But I think China, what they say and what they do are often not the same thing. So
No,
you have to.
China done because I mean they have a very cruel policy. They kind of lend you money and then they kind of crush you under the debt. So they have a very cruel policy. Be it in Sri Lanka, be it Bangladesh. They are trying to pull them towards them through money, but the debt which these people have to pay is immense. So they are again reeling in the whole process of poverty. So China can't be trusted in that particular way.
Yeah, I think that criticism has been leveled at the World Bank as well. They kind of saddle countries with debt and then impose very harsh austerity and policies on them. But do you think, David? Do you think a worldwide internet is going to be like the best way to achieve these goals if we get everyone connected around the world? Or how feasible
The
is that?
problem you have with looking at I'm going to use your term, worldwide internet, is that each local jurisdiction, be it a home, a company, a country, all can put their own restrictions on it. We see that in PRC all the time today. China has put tremendous restrictions on what's there and a tremendous amount of monitoring. And so it depends on what you can accept as part of that. And particularly when you're looking at skill development in something like SDGs, it can be controversial because it can impact local economies and stuff too. And that the sustainable development goals, which are built around education, which are built around equality and everything else, are very strong ones. And it's actually both of those are part of the 15% where there has been measurable action that has been undertaken on the sustainable development goals, where the majority of them have not had measurable development or they have slid backwards. So you see that happening. I know as I've traveled globally, you see tremendous cultural differences in those areas too. When I have been in India, when I've been in Brazil, when I've been in some places in Africa, and even across different states in the United States, you see considerable differences of treatment and things like that. There are so many initiatives that are piecemeal out there. Part of what we've spoken on this program in the past is that we need to begin to look at better ways to collaborate, to be better ways to look at how to use our own group intelligence and pull more of these initiatives together to create good. I've done some work in Haiti, which is the poorest nation in uh, these two hemispheres on this side of the world. And you see World Bank, International Development Bank, USAID, all these aid things coming in. But on each of those, about 70% of the money's lost. It's lost to corruption. It's lost to other things like that. We see that today in Russia. So much of what's been done there has been lost to corruption. And we're seeing that in other countries like in Africa as well. That we need to look at ways to help. I don't want to use the word project manage, but you want to help put enough things in place that you can see that people are making progress, that the money is being spent well, that you are working on a global basis and not just a regional basis to do some of the things that are required to begin to meet the goals under the Sustainable Development Goals. And the goals are wide ranging. Uh, I can tell you some of the cultures are never going to meet some of the goals, particularly some of the soft goals around equality and like that, because the cultures do not support that. So, you know, if I were to go into um, some of the cultures in the Middle East, I I would bet a whole lot of money there's not going to be progress against those goals there, and I'd probably win. Um, but you have to look at how to do it, and these goals are goals that we put together as humans. These are not goals that came as absolute truth, and there's variability in the goals. There's variability in the targets, and we have to work as a world group to understand those and to understand the differences and the nuances, and to be able to put in place plans using our group intelligence, using our systems, and then, yes, again, using our systems of systems to address this on a basis that we can uh, effectively work as a large team on. You know, the this is not something one country can do. It's not something that one company can do internationally. It is not something that one NGO like the UN or others can do. It's not something that well, the World Bank and International Development Bank, and those are NGOs as well. It's not something that they can do by themselves. And oftentimes there's conflicting priorities. Uh, you know, if I look at some of the money being spent for digitalization globally, and I look at the monies being spent, I don't understand why we do not have it in many of the countries where we've spent a lot more per capita to establish digital connectivity than we have in the United States, but the percentage is so much lower. And there has to be other elements here that we don't understand well. And some of it's local culture, some of it's how you just do business in the different places. I can tell you there's many places in the world where we've gone in to do some things and we were told, yeah, we love you, we love what you're doing, but you've got to hire these 10 people and put them on your payroll or you're not going to do anything here. And you know, you have to factor that into your business decision making, and that has to go to the Sustainable Development Goals. But the real important thing with today's topic is the last two words in today's topic, the upskilling. And as we can begin to upskill the government, as we can upscale these NGOs, as we can upscale the companies, the academic institutions, and the citizens, this is going to become more manageable to do. Education has a wonderful way of helping shine light on things. because an educated group of people who are informed can create momentum that is just tremendous. We've seen that throughout history over the millennial. And it's what we need to do today with that. So, Dan, I hope this kind of goes to the questions you were asking there. I almost feel like a philosopher right now as opposed to a futurist and a technologist. But that's kind of what I see. And I fortunately in my career have been parts of things that have changed, quite honestly, changed part of the world. And it's always having to pull those pieces together. We have a concept that we use called the technopolis, which is the government, the commercial, the academic, and the citizens coming together to create the change, to create the good, and to drive the outcome. And that approach is needed here tremendously if we're ever going to be able to impact the sustainable development goals. And again, as we talk about often, a lot of it's through education. So, Dan, I hope that helped.
Well, it'd be great if everyone got a free Starlink. I don't think they're covering the whole world yet, but there's ways to do free internet without satellites too.
Well, and particularly the new Starlinks with the laser as opposed to the radio frequency. But you're right.
And there's people in amateur radio, which I'm an extra class amateur radio operator that do internet over your public FCC licensed ham frequencies, which I think is something that you're not supposed to do commercial transactions. So it's a little bit of a gray area with using just internet for everything over amateur radio. But I think there's ways to get around the commercial restrictions. But yeah, my favorite goal is probably the human rights one, because I think that kind of, if we fix that one, all the other ones would sort of get fixed. Most people don't know about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I think we need an upgrade to humane rights.
Dan, the problem is that currently in the world, like since the 70s, the rise of the multiculturalist movement. What happened was that human rights got pitted against the cultural rights. Now, the minute you say cultural rights, means you can, it's the women who suffer the most, women, children, and the liberal voices within the community. So, human rights, they would not accept the human rights as such. They'll say this is not our culture which says about this thing. We have our own way of looking at things, and this is our cultural rights. We want special rights for this, and so for example, the triple talaq, for example, it got outlawed in India lately, but for several, almost 70 years, it was here. When, despite the fact that Iran and many Saudi Arabian countries, banned triple talaq. So multiculturalism does that to people, and so obviously we all are born in a culture, and we have that effect. Nobody can say that the house which we were born in, it has a lot of effect on all of us, our upbringing, and the way we speak, the way we think. It does. Education later on, but first it's your culture. But if it for example, it doesn't help women, or the liberal voices, for example, and they are suppressed, then the human rights have to come into picture. And I personally feel that human rights are something which are the most important things, and they should be like which grants equal rights to women and men, despite whatever the culture says, is extremely important.
There's so many people on the move just because they don't want to be killed, by gangs or by bad governments right now. But yeah, I think cultural rights, that's usually thought of as a subset, like, well, that's included in the human rights, but maybe it's so important that it should be its own kind of set, talking about cultural rights. I know right now, like Cuba, people are just selling items in the streets to not starve. They're actually, their centralized economy has failed them, so they're
Yeah.
breaking out the mass capitalist sidewalk vending. Uh, but I think I'd like to see a seastead where you have all your cultural and human rights respected, and you can make a living by doing unskilled up to skilled labor. I don't think that's a huge ask. I think that's very possible to start doing.
It's
I'm on.
it's about it's about the right of the individual. It's about the fact that women as individuals have certain rights. If she wants to wear a certain cloth, she should be allowed to do so. I mean, I'm not talking about vulgarity or something. It's prevalent in many countries, for example, even in India, for example. But in certain countries which are up, where veil is extremely important, part of their dressing. If suppose women out there want to dress up in a certain way, for example, a simple jeans, so I guess that those kind of individual rights should be available to women as such. Why should they not be? Because they look at, after all, Arab revolution, etc., which happened, these things, Iran, the woman who cut her hair was uh, killed. So these kind of things, because women are seeking independence. The more the internet is spreading, the more of these people are looking at different aspect of the world, and where women are being treated in a better way. So why aren't we treated better? So every country, women are comparing themselves with the other countries, and that is the whole issue around women rights.
You
Yes,
can make an argument that the first right is the right to be left alone. That there are no positive rights. There are only, a libertarian analysis would say there are negative rights. So we would restrain the person who wants to uh, interfere with the woman's head styles. But it's an interesting question. How much culture do you allow to exist in the world if it's an oppressive culture? David, you were talking
yes.
about there's cultures where you're not going to see the gender equality thing happening anytime soon. So and the Confederacy wanted to have the right to own people. Should they have been allowed their own culture?
No, because
Uh,
I mean, it's um, everywhere the news is available. On your mobiles, everywhere the news is available. People are comparing themselves. Women are comparing themselves. How am I, and how is a woman being treated in London, for example? So she is comparing herself. Why am I not treated well? What have I done? What is a crime I have done that I have been dealt in such a way? So I guess that has to be kept in mind, that now we are in a world which is extremely, it's a global village. So we are all in the same boat. We have to protect ourselves in a certain way, because we very soon might face certain other kind of challenges like aliens, etc. So probably we have to be ready for those kind of challenges, and take care of these challenges first, and then deal with the other ones.
I think if you let people move to where they want to be, that's such a huge right, because a lot of people are not allowed to move out of where they don't like the culture and they don't like the
Yeah.
situation. So, how do we fix the problem with people not being allowed to move freely to a place where they have the culture they want and the rights they want? Is that
Yeah.
uh, is that
Yeah,
what we
because
fix first, or do we fix trying to
I
impose?
guess because most countries have this immigrant problems, and many like India, we had made a law, for example, which said that people who are from Bangladesh, Nepal, oh sorry, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan, they could, if they were ill treated in their own countries, they could, Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, if they were ill treated, they could come to India, but they did not include Pakistan. So many of the leftists in India, for example, had a problem with that. They said that why should we like let Pakistanis enter our country? So so that is the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of a majority Islam versus majority Hindu question with the India-Pakistan divide. And you
Yes.
might say that in the U.S., there's a lot of the people in the MAGA movement that want to make the U.S. an ethno-state, Christian theocracy with, we just want white, rich people and, let's put a
Yeah.
fence
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
it, you know.
Yes.
So I don't know. Do we allow people to have oppressive states existing side by side? That's a tough question. I don't think the goals address that.
I guess
Really.
as Rawls would say that we need not have illiberal states, but have liberal states with autonomy given to the individual. I mean, autonomy not in the negative sense, but like in the positive sense. Where people help each other in, I mean, for welfare of people, for example. I mean, you have that positive right to help each other, lift each other from poverty, etc. So those kind of things in SDGs are also very prominently mentioned. So I mean, obviously they have been borrowed heavily from many of our past thinkers. So from the feminist movement as well as the liberal movement and the Marxist movement. So many of these have been borrowed from heavily from these movements. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite one of the goals, David? Just as kind of a conversation starter. You're muted. Maybe he's.
My favorite UN Sustainable Development Goals is actually them in composite because they all work with each other, and you cannot achieve them all without parts of the other. That's why it's a complex system. That's why it's a systems to systems approach. So to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, you have to look across that whole ecosystem, and that's why upskilling, why education, why group intelligence, why pulling all the stakeholders together is so important.
So maybe education is the jujitsu point, but you're right. It is a whole, and if you don't achieve them all at the same time, you're not going to make very good progress. But some of them are pretty optimistic, like zero hunger, zero poverty in just 7 years. I mean, that's going to be a tough one. But the path I like to upskilling is what are called these local exchange trading systems, where people can trade an hour of one skill for an hour of another skill. And I think this can be done now, not just in person, but over the internet too. I'd like to see these, and I think actually the whole COVID lockdown, everyone remotely working, there's some evidence that was a big boost to the economy. People getting good at remote commuting and telepresence, as it were. But yes, upskilling really it's such an important topic. It could almost be its own show and not, but I guess it goes in with the education sustainable development goal.
Education is a must actually, because
Yeah.
I mean, when the first thing a child learns, when the child is like 1 year old, is the child goes to the school. And but for example, in countries like India, they do not have that access. Many of them, who are poor. For Africa, for example, Dan, you won't believe, I mean, I took a class of many very senior African students on political theory, and they grasped everything so well. I mean, they were so happy. They are in touch with me even now. They introduce their wives, their niece, nephews, etc. to me even now. Like they're so happy that like somebody is teaching them. They are hungry to be taught. I mean, if we all get together and teach them, they would. I mean, they'll themselves set their own countries free.
I know we have had some enlightenment salons with Africans who are doing incredible work teaching technology, building robots, and one invention I thought was great was a cane that had sensors in it. The cane that blind people use, and this would actually detect nearby objects and make an audible alert sound. Very, very simple idea, but very, very beautiful. Reducing suffering through technology. I think
Yeah.
that's the key, because we've got so much technology to do that with, to reduce suffering. And I don't want to plug particular parties and things, because that's not the focus of the show. But they're out there. There are parties that are looking to do that, to reduce suffering through technology. And yeah, so do you think the goals, it looks to me like they're mostly oriented toward the future generations? Like they keep mentioning children need this and children need that. Are they, is the UN kind of giving up on the older people, and they're just worried about the children now?
Not at all. Not at all. The wisdom of older people is something which is beyond the question. I mean, a 90 plus person would be so intelligent that that person can give you the wisdom of the whole life. So, I mean, not at all. I mean, that's out of question, because, I mean, I understand that people who are in their 70s and 80s, they have so much of knowledge that they can help people who are like younger. They should be employed, for example, people who are still active mentally, and physically, they should be given the right to uh, give their wisdom. As I mean, most of, I guess, people who are 70 plus, they themselves become philosophers, because they've seen so much of life, so I mean, I feel that they should be included in a big way. And and they should interact with children, because children love listening to stories, so like grandmothers and grandfathers are the ones who do that for their children. So I guess teaching them things in story format would be lovely for them, and it's going to be satisfying for people who are like 70, 80, or 90 plus also. So I mean, I'm not biased against old people at all, not at all.
How do you feel about English sort of being the default universal language? Do you think that's, I mean, it is for aviation. If you want to fly a plane, you have to learn English so you can talk to the control towers around the world.
I mean, Daniel, I don't have any problem with English, but the thing is that, I mean, now, for example, in India, India has learned from colonial history of its, that,
Mm,
if we do not develop our own country's languages, because, India is a country which has language in after every 100 kilometers, we have, after every district, we have a different language. So we have, you can't imagine the kind of stories we have, the kind of poems we have, the kind of
mm,
uh, philosophies we have. So they are all very different. So for example, the rightist government right now is trying to encourage Hindi. Mr. Modi, for example, in be it in UN, be it in America, be it in France, he always speaks in Hindi.
mm.
I mean, I mean, Dan, you must be knowing that French people from France speak in French. Japanese speak in Japanese, and why not we speak in Hindi? So that is a question which they have. But the fact is that in South India and East India, they do not understand too much of Hindi. They understand English. So that is why English and Hindi have been made the national language by the Constitution of India. So both these languages go simultaneously in India.
So keep English as a second language, but keep your primary culture through, because I know
Yeah.
there's words that sometimes do not translate from one language into English, you
Yes.
know.
Yes.
And there's wonderful poetry and, like you said, stories that can only be fully appreciated in the native language that they
Yeah.
were written in. Yeah, beautiful thought. I wonder why that's not in the. I guess that's sort of part of the education, sustainable
Yes.
development goal.
Yes.
goal.
Yes. 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 Yeah.
Well, this is a great topic, upskilling. Something that I like to see that I think helps with upskilling is when you have employee ownership of a company. And, actually we have laws for something in America called ESOP, which is Employee Stock Ownership Plan. And I think most owners of companies don't know about it, but it lets the owner keep controlling the company. It gets him out of tax liability. I mean, but the workers are all owning the company, and it's really a great deal for a company owner, I don't think there's enough education about that. But there's cooperatives too. There's credit unions, which are better than banks because it's a co-op, and you're not paying big inflated middleman
Yes.
management fees. So
Yeah,
I think just the process of going to stakeholder ownership is a big upskilling factor and a big equality factor too. So
for
that's
sure, for
something
sure.
I'm going to be talking about as I do my community activism and, and attempts at public service.
Yes.
But David was mentioning about 70% of the aid gets siphoned off by corruption usually, and I think that's because a lot of people that they see public service as a path to self-enrichment. So
No, if
it's
you, Dan, if you see the the grain deal, the Russian and Ukrainian grain deal, I mean, just because of the war, it's the so much of people in Africa are suffering because of that, you
mm,
know, and so I guess that that kind of a corruption, the war, the corruption, and everything coming together is harming the people so much more. Everybody, America is seeing its own benefit out of it, and the Western European countries are seeing their own profit out of it. But the fact is that there are people who are suffering. So I mean, because they will not get cheap food then. From where will they get food if these things are not tackled in a best possible manner? So I guess corruption is a major problem affecting countries. I mean, in India, it's a major problem. Corruption. I mean, your files are not going to move ahead if you don't pay them some crores. For example, if you want some house or something, so it's very much visible in India. I mean, I don't know how much is it in America.
yeah, I'm sure it's there. Do you think like peer-to-peer things like Bitcoin, where you could just transfer wealth from person to another person, and that way no one can intercept the Bitcoin transfer, is that something that might cut out some of the corruption when we try to send
Yes.
wealth? Is By the way, is this that allowed in India? Did they make Bitcoin illegal? I think in India, or I think I heard
No.
somewhere that no, they've never done that. Maybe it was some other country
No.
where they
Yeah. Yeah.
tried to outlaw digital transactions like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's one route I would
India
see.
is progressing. India is progressing fast. You will see by. I mean, the aim of the government is to become third largest GDP country within next 4 5 years,
Hmm.
and by 2047 we'll be the developed world. So that's what's the aim of the government. People in India, right now. So yeah.
Is India considered the global south right now, you think? Or
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
so it's not strictly the equator, it's the dividing line. It's
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of a rough dividing line, this global
Yeah.
south.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I really think a seastead project where we're growing things like kelp. I mean, you can actually make protein out of fast growing plants from the ocean. So maybe that will spur, this grain shortage because of the war. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, I heard a rumor that the Wagner Group deliberately started this war to benefit the big arms manufacturers. So, I mean, that's not an entirely unreasonable, theory, because that's
Yes.
who
Yes.
ultimately profits. Who profits from the war? The people making the
Yes. Yes.
weaponry.
I mean,
So,
all of them are doing the same. Dan, I mean, America is also doing the
yeah,
same.
I know.
Western European countries also. I mean, because they are profiting out of it. Whenever, for example, India is selling its weapons to somebody, obviously it's the profit which they are gaining out of it. If we give our technology to somebody, we are also gaining something out of it. We are not doing it out of our non-selfish means. It's like we are getting something out of it,
Yeah.
politically as well as monetarily, both ways,
Anytime there's a profit motive, there's going to be some level of corruption, I'm afraid.
for
um,
sure.
because I know one of the goals is health and well-being, and I know you've got pharmaceutical company corruption is a big cause celeb of yours to remedy. So that's included in the, in the goals, and
Absolutely.
teaching people not to be bamboozled by centralized power is a part of the education too.
Yeah.
We have rejoined by Sharif and David. I guess we're wrapping up here. It's been about an hour, but I really appreciate getting to talk on this important topic.
Mr. David, you have any closing remarks for today's session?
Well, Sharif, this is, as we said, a very important topic, and there's huge advantages for nations and companies and others to digitally upscale their staff. Uh, the World Economic Forum did a study that said that when you upscaled your people in your companies, you have over 3 times the improvement in innovation. As we know, innovation is very important to try to solve this type of sustainable development goals. And so the training, the pulling everyone together to understand that all of the SDGs interact with each other and that they're part of trying to be the solution that is necessary there. So, as in many cases, Sharif, we have to work together. We have to collaborate. We have to understand we're in time of lifelong learning, and we have to start this lifelong learning early to meet these goals. So, Dr. Sharif, that's my concluding remarks.
Thank
It's a
you.
pretty long delay. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Madam Tamanna, you have any closing remarks for today?
Yes, Dr. Sharif, actually, my personal, as of now, right now, what we are facing in the world is war, and it's affecting the whole world right now. I mean, so my personal, I mean, as an SDG, what should be included is diplomacy and dialogue. Dialogue means deliberative democracy, where the world over, we need to be able to deliberate in a better way, so that it should be a win-win situation for both the countries. Nobody should feel excluded, and everybody needs to be included in the dialogue. And I mean, enmity between nations need to cease, because we have better things in life to do, and better options should be available to citizens of different countries. And so there, the SDGs other goals which are there, like the so many of the other goals, I guess every country needs to fulfill them. Only then can war be done.
Well, I'd like to conclude my participation
Thank
by
you, Mr.
saying, yeah. Again, I want to mention that the 18th proposed goal of the space economy and space development will rapidly accelerate all the other 17 goals. And indeed, space is the next ocean. And if you consider that we are all independent vessels, the law of the sea has a very interesting thing where if you see another vessel in distress, you are actually legally bound to render aid to another vessel in distress. So if we were to apply that law of the sea to ourselves and as vessels, and to treat other people as vessels, that might solve a heck of a lot of problems. So I'll leave you with that thought. And thanks again.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I request all of our speakers and audience, please share our content as much as possible. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Thank you.